The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
Talofa lover, I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-Off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-Off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by Spark Lab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about Spark Lab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by The Spin-Off with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Auckland is the biggest Pasifika city in the world and has been for decades. But for many years, you could consume an awful lot of media and not know it. Save for a few off-peak shows where an institution called Tangata Pasifika showcased great stories at odd times and was still made with an eye to not alienating any non-intended audience. And then, around 2010, something really cool happened. A show called Fresh burst onto the scene. It told Pasifika stories in a true Pasifika voice, made with an eye to being relevant and real and proudly for the community first. It went great guns, becoming a cult hit and helping to launch careers and talents into the industry. The producer, Lisa Tauma, extended this as the monolithic media continued to give way, launching the Coconut, an online virtual village that tells Pasifika stories in unique ways and is consumed and loved through the prime time of the internet. It's such a cool force in media, and to talk the journey, being the change and telling stories for the audience rather than the nice old ducks that might have accidentally turned on the telly of a morning, Lisa joins us now. Kia ora, good morning.
Good morning, lovely to be here.
Hey, tell me about how you got started in on-screen storytelling.
Yep, so I had done a lot of things in the arts realm, and I'd done some moving image, and I'd done art history and film at Varsity doing an MA, and I'd made some short films, as you do, pretty terrible, really glad they will never see the light of day. But because I'd been working in moving image quite early off my own steam, when Tangata finally had a new placement to take someone on. TVNZ in those days had a lot of long-term contractors. People rarely left. Anyway, there was a gap in the market, as it were, and I happened to sort of be in the right place at the right time. They have had a fantastic producer, Stephen Staline, who shoulder-tapped me and brought me on, which was hugely exciting because this program, Tangata Pasifika, had been going, it's in its 35th year, I think, but they had only had a budget for X amount of people over the years, and so there was only ever a chance for any Pacific person to get into on-screen storytelling if someone left. So I just happened to be around at the right time when someone did leave, because, you know, as you said, there was this few and far between, and there was one program for all Pacific people of all ages, every single island denomination, and we had 22 minutes on tally for, you know, at that stage, 15 years, and that was it.
It's hard to overstate now just how narrow the broadcasting was, if that really was kind of the only position. There weren't documentary strands, there weren't youth shows, there weren't anything else kind of aimed at the Pasifika community.
Well, that's right. And I mean, it had a lot to do with, I think, the way that New Zealand generally thought about itself at the time. Some would argue still do, because, you know, I think we've just always been uncomfortable with our recognition of our identity as one of the biggest Pacific islands in the region. region. And I think there's always been this disassociation. And in the 70s and 80s and 90s, there was still all this broadcast stuff that was, clinging to, a lot of overseas media. But even the stuff that was being produced here, really, it was just so divorced, really, from our place in the region and reflecting the sorts of society that we were, and so I think the Pacific sector was seen as this tiny migrant sector still that were really lucky to have any representation at all, because we were this small migrant community, and I think we've had to kick the door wide open, not only with getting the broadcast sector to recognise that, with its diversity, Pacific people needed to be at the forefront of that for many, many reasons, but also that we weren't just one homogenous kind of group. There were so many sectors within that. The biggest sector is our youth sector. We're one of the fastest growing youth populations in the country. So while the New Zealand population's rapidly aging, and it's an aged population, the Pacific population is browning by the minute. So as we speak, it's becoming browner and browner. And in 20 years, the projection is we are going to be a very brown population. And this is the future of Aotearoa.
And it's amazing that so much of the television being produced as well. We're not talking a long time ago here. This is, 10 years ago even, before there were more outlets and more youth shows and more internet vehicles like the ones that you've built. But if you did have 22 minutes on television, that was still mediated through the view of what if an 85-year-old in Ekatahuna just happened to turn on the TV. It all has to make perfect sense to them as well as the community it's made for, which must make it very challenging to tell authentic stories.
Well, it was. I mean, there's two things with that, though, because everything on the golden space of television and, the state-owned network. So, and tangata's on TV1. So anything on that in that hallowed space has to go through all the commissioning filters and all that. And there is that, it was very, very through a specific filter. So you're making a product that's put through a filter. It's funded for a niche audience, but via the network, it has to also be understood by a wide audience. So there's so many challenges with that. And so it was really, really challenging. But the great thing is when you're as off peak as we were, there's a certain amount of getting things through under the radar, because it just kind of like isn't enough resource as well with a lot of the networks to monitor a lot of stuff. So yes, it's the filter's always hard, and the filter's always going to be there with those spaces. So I think we've been lucky with a lot of the stuff that we did with Fresh, in that we managed to, again, it was a matter of timing. I think it came in, I'd been pitching it for years. So Tangata Pasifika was the only Pacific show for about 15 years, I think. And when I came on, I just recognised that there was this huge need for youth community stuff, because the communities are really, really different. And the Pacific community in New Zealand now is 70% are Kiwi born, are New Zealand born. So it's a really, really different community to our migrant parents. And this community is the fast-growing community. And this is a completely different audience. So trying to merge stories for the older audience, the younger audience, is really, really, really hard. And we know that this is where the views are, this is where the numbers are. So that's what motivated pitching shows like Polyfest and Fresh, which became their own series. And I managed to convince the networks that this was the audience, this is the viewership. It needed a separate show.
And that's remarkable. I mean, that process of having something in the voice of the audience and taking so long to go. But it wasn't necessarily a business case problem either, because there have been really successful media like MyFM that for years have been talking directly in a voice to their audience. So, I mean, how tricky was it to get it up and going? And then once you got Fresh going, how important was it to make it work?
And you know what? Everything in the universe, I think, is a matter of being in the right time and space. It's a timing issue. And I think we're really, really lucky, because that we're lucky in the landscape of broadcasting. Two things happened that kind of allowed us that pathway, and it's as we know, it's a hugely difficult pathway to get. Not just one-off shows, but the idea of a separate series of shows, that could possibly be long-standing. I mean, it's just really, even now, it's a hugely hard thing to do. But I think one we were really lucky with Brotown. So Brotown came along. TVNZ had famously declined it, along with Flight of the Conchords. Anyway, TV3 picks up Brotown. Catherine Denave, what a star. She made the incredible programming decision of putting it on prime time. This animated comedy that was the most irreverent, politically incorrect, possibly, but that innovative thing that spoke in this language that New Zealand television had never heard before. I mean, and then it became the part of the lingua franca. I mean, I remember getting in a taxi and this 80-year-old Palangi man saying, "Not even now," and I mean, and people often forget, this generation, because it was actually so long ago. Brotown was 15 years ago. Yeah. Brotown became a smash hit for TV3, and that translates into revenue. And then they put it on after it was on at 7:30. Then they shifted it because it was so popular. They shifted it from 9:30 to 7:30. So you got this program that puts Pacific people in all our complete irreverence and the way we speak in this, and it was speaking directly to a Pacific audience. There was very little filtering around it. I mean, yeah, it was extraordinary, loaded with celebs, but that was on prime time television. So I think it woke the industry up to this market's appeal to a mainstream, and I think we came along after that, like I pitched hard after Brotown had been such a success, and there was this sort of, okay, so there is this audience.
Hadn't you pushed hard earlier to get Oscar Kitely on television in the first place, though?
I so had.
So it's a big circle.
Yeah, it is a circle. That's right. So I made a documentary for Documentary New Zealand on TV1 on the Otara markets with Oscar, and yeah, that's right. And I remember pitching him to the network people, and they were going, "Oh, untapped talent," and Oscar's going, "I've been tapping for years. What do they mean?"
Yeah. So that's the thing when you say it's timing, but you'd been creating pitches and pushing to have this huge sector of the population reflected on the national television network for years. So the timing was really they just catching up.
Probably. I mean, everyone's playing catch up now still, I think. But that's the gig. You tap and you pitch, and you tap and you pitch, and we all know that gig. But I think it was you're exactly right. It was the sector catching up to this audience, and I think also at the time there was sort of a lot of there's this perception about Pacific young people being very cool and very sort of exotic. They're sort of edgy, kind of, especially in the fashion scene and in moving image and stuff. There was a lot of and celebs. There was because of the rise of the Pacific music industry at the time, which is now completely bottomed out. But you look at the TUI Awards in the early 2000s, and every single major award was won by a Pacific artist. So the Pacific people were really at the forefront of the arts sector, especially in the music sector. There was lots of cool stuff happening. So that was the second thing that happened, was that we're kind of riding that amazing wave of Pacific arts creativity at the time. So that was happening too. And through the network filter, through a business filter, it was all sort of audience, and it was going to be attractive, and that's how we got it in after 10 years of knocking on the door.
And so Fresh started as an hour-long series. And you mentioned before about the importance of not just having a one-off. And I don't know if outside of the television production industry, everyone really understands what a pipeline for talent a long-standing show becomes. What now has created so many great people who have gone on to all kinds of different presenting and production roles. And then, Shorten Street has meant the entire television production industry could get a mortgage. And there's things like this where having a series means that people can get bedded in, earn their chops, know that they can make a living from telling stories they care about.
Yeah. That is very true, and I'm so impressed you knew it was an hour. No, so we were given an hour, and we're only given 16 eps of the entire year, and we had an hour. An hour's a lot of tally to make, in a week.
It's huge.
And because it was our first time, and it was the first chance that any young Pacific people had ever had, I had this amazing crew of people who make Fresh with me still. But we were so excited about it that everyone just went completely hard out because this was the one chance and it couldn't be bad. So not only was it an hour, but we made it an hour of a ton of vignettes. Like, we didn't do the smart thing where you make sort of long form bits. We made, I think in an hour we had maybe 12 or 15 sections of tally, which was huge. But you're right about the platforming for people. And what we decided to do with Fresh, which I think made it really fresh, but also was really innovative at the time. Like, nobody had really done it, apart from a program called The Living Room, which we loved, was it put real
show.
people on screen. And so we didn't want to do presenters. We had this thing, presenters were really old-fashioned, and we just wanted to put the community on screen. So we made our lives even more difficult by not having presenters, by having different people present the show every week. So, and that's still the running gig, and our life is still difficult because of that. But I think that was the game changer for the show, and that's what made it really different. And I think that's what's sustained it as well, possibly because of that point of difference. So it's putting the community on screen. It's getting, at the time we had a whole raft of Pacific celebs that we could give platform to, but also up and coming people, the island innovators, and getting people to talk directly down the camera. We were trying to do the whole break the third wall thing, and just have people speaking directly to the camera. So that was great too, because it meant that people were really interested in seeing stars like Sonny Bill Williams, for example, in a context they've never seen him. So it's not just doing a rugby grab after a game and saying the standard things about the game of two halves or whatever. You'd see him with his mum in the kitchen making chop suey, but speaking directly to the camera. So I think there was a huge appeal with that, because it really added to this idea of authenticity of voice. So you create this program where you throw people on screen, you speak directly to the camera, and even when they stuff up and they can't say, articulate what's coming up next on the show or whatever, the warts and all is such an important part of it. Yeah. And that's been the driving factor the whole way through with everything, is just that authenticity of seeing real people, and getting those real voices through. And I know that's like a buzzword that everyone says, authenticity, all the time, but that was really true of that. Yeah. Of that show coming in at that time.
And like a sense of curiosity and a sense of humour.
Yes, and the humour factor is really huge with Pacific people. And I hate this whole thing, I don't want to fit into the whole, we're all a bunch of jolly pollies who sit around laughing. It's true, we do. But the sense of our sense of humour is the thing that is uniting across all polycultures, so it's the thing, the one sort of homogenizing factor with all our stuff, no matter which Pacific language you speak. There's this real commonality with the humour, and just the sense of joy, and I think that's been the most rewarding thing about making Fresh, is that people have told me that when they watch it, they're just smiling the whole way through. It's kind of just reaffirming that warts and all, and anyone, like someone in a school production in Manurewa can present a show, and we can see their life, and it's just as meaningful as a Radna, or so it's just it's shining a light on all these tiny communities, and having them be so happy about it, but also the comedy factor, and being able to put comedy on screen, that's not that's not your standard kind of scripted comedy sort of stuff. So we've worked with lots of comedians, and there's no way you can script them, which has been hellish for production. And it's been a lot of hurdles to try to explain to the network as well, like to write the pitch about what you're going to see in a way that, that makes it palatable, and you go do something completely different. But I remember trying to explain the character of Auntie Tala, who is this man with a beard and a frock, but hugely popular with Pacific communities, and his brand of Tōwhinga Whipulea'i's brand of humour, and trying to explain that to the network, why that's going to be popular, this, and why they should get it over the line, kind of thing. And so explaining the comedy's been hard, but the comedy is, I think, been the driving force of Fresh.
Tell me what you learnt taking that, taking the way that you connect to your audience from Fresh and putting it into the CocoNet. And I love this idea. I saw you speak in an interview about this idea of, like, on the internet, it's always prime time. And, like, so much of special interest, which is funny when you're talking about 12 to 15% of the population, content has been so off peak.
Yes, that's right. So, and I think in terms of a business model as well, because Fresh is made for a network, and it's played at a terrible time for Pacific people. So it's 10 a.m. Saturday morning, TV2, and that's the traditional sports hour. So we're fighting all the environmentals around that audience. So we're with the CocoNet and with making an online channel, I think, again, we were really, really lucky in terms of timing, because it did that thing where you make something for a marketplace where there's a huge need that is not being met anywhere in the world. So it's putting something into this huge thirsty audience that allows them to watch it whenever they want. So it's at prime time all the time, but it's also the great equalizer, and it's where the online world is where you can find if you've got a niche product that doesn't exist anywhere else, it becomes the big primetime model. So it's great. And then you look at all the internet stars that have been born out of that. And I went to a YouTube conference in Sydney recently, and they had all this resource around this huge big conference, and they had some of the best industry creatives in Australia and New Zealand, but the stars were the kids who were there who had the most YouTube hits. And so the stars were like a 16-year-old Asian girl who had thousands and thousands and thousands of hits, and another really young girl who had created this whole online thing. So it is a great equalizer. And you look at all the, I don't know, the makeup stars and it creates industry from bedrooms, basically. So we're really lucky with timing for the CocoNet, because it had never been done. There was no online home for Pacific people at all. There were people making a few things on YouTube and on Facebook, and so this was in 2013. 2013-14. So we were really lucky with timing and being able to introduce to the world a hub where they could come and find Pacific video content. And we're really lucky as well, because we got backed by New Zealand on there, and that was very, very, very hard at the time to get them to believe in the audience and in us. But thank God they had an awesome digital person on board, Brenda Leeuwenberg, who took a bit of convincing, but eventually believed in our vision, as it were. And it was great. So then when we put all that stuff online, it just exploded.
Does that allow you to let the people tell you what they want to watch, rather than maybe a commissioner who, they've got lots of other people that they are reporting to. They may not have the same community understanding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. People,
good people, but maybe not the best people to be in charge of the decisions.
So it's good, and so it's got got that great kind of socialist element about it, I suppose, as well, with people giving you feedback on every single thing you publish, not shy, because people, it's that whole thing. They realise they can say whatever they want behind a keyboard. So you get tons and tons and tons of feedback on everything. And we've had some really good feedback and really interesting feedback. And so, and from around the world, like I had underestimated how big it would be to Pacific Islanders worldwide because, you forget there's no Pacific TV anywhere else in the world apart from the local island tally. There's no other countries with migrant Pacific populations that are making tally in this. Like Australia, for example, there's tons of Pacific people in Australia. There's no Pacific tally. There's no Pacific stuff. So it kind of like there was this huge need for what we did with the Coconut, and it went gangbusters. And it's still, like every new video we release has an avid audience waiting for it. Waiting to illegally rip it off and download it and put it straight to Facebook.
Use the share button. Use the share button.
Yeah, exactly.
And tell me about, like, there's a really cool idea in the Coconut as well about this concept of, with so many Pasifika people being born in New Zealand and not having the exposure to growing up in the islands, the how-to content is really fascinating.
Yes.
That's
right.
About that.
Because again, it comes back to this whole thing that these Kiwi Pacific audiences are our biggest population here, and they're so hungry for material from their homelands. And when we made the Coconut, we thought, the easy sell is going to be the comedy. It's going to be like fresh. That we've got to make lots of comedy because the people are going to want to watch that, and then we'll make some heritage stuff, and we'll try to to garner the interest of the comedy and push some of the heritage stuff to people. But to our amazement and delight, the stuff that's really gone off is all the actual island content. So it's heritage content, it's language learning, it's cultural learning from the islands that you put in these how-to sections, but you make them kind of, relevant to the young audience. So it's like how to wear a ta'ovala, how to get into a nightclub in Suva, how to dodge a flying jandal, how to weave a Niuean basket, and those sorts of things have been really popular. And that, which is, I don't know why I was so surprised by that, because, it's true of the population here and the things that, the hankering they have for wanting to know things from their parents' homelands.
How important has it been, or how helpful has it been for running the business side of the operations? The way that TV is structured, where every project's like, you've got to make a little business case and you've got to, convince investors, and then you've got to run a budget to the dollar or else New Zealand on air. It's all over. I mean, how important is it to get those kind of disciplines and structures into all of the production managers and the producers and all the people you work with?
It has been difficult, but I mean, luckily, we had. There was a sector that in a certain, and because we'd been in-house, I'd been in-house with TVNZ, and I'd produced the show Polyfest for about 5 years in-house. And so I was used to working with budgets and accountability and all the stringent sorts of reporting that you have to do. So I'd sort of known that. And also, and then when we became a business ourselves, an independent business, I hired people that had a lot of knowledge around those areas from the sector, because that was one thing I just did not want to get wrong. And I didn't want to have any sort of whisperings of the perception of, first-time brown people, and they're not being completely transparent and accountable and blah, blah, blah. So I just made sure that we had people from the sector that could do, a lot of the back end of it. The casework, oh my God, you're so right. I mean, so there's one thing coming up with a brilliant creative idea, which you do every single day, 10 times a day. It's putting the back end around it, making a business case for it, and that's really time consuming as well. So you have to sort of divide your time between being part of the creative sector, but then also translating it into a business case and having strict accountability around all that process.
Way stricter than you find in most businesses, I'd suggest as well. Like the TV production industry is tremendously well run.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of it's government funded, and so you have to do reporting at every single stage of production, which takes time, But it's good because it does teach you all those processes. I mean, it's been a really valuable learning case for business, I suppose, is the good thing about it. It's incredibly time consuming, but measurables and reporting the whole way. One thing that is great is with online stuff, the measurables are so much clearer and so much more realistic, a capture of your audience than it is on telly. And the TV, because as many people know, the TV rating system's hugely inaccurate, and it's really, really random. And whole programs are measured by the drop in 1 point for telly ratings. Online measurables, you cannot lie. You cannot. They're a great capture of who's actually watched your page for how many seconds at what time. So, funding agencies like New Zealand On Air need those measurables all the time. And I plaster ours all over our reports. We get 90,000 people view through on average a month. This is how we know this. This is how. So it's a really good reflection of stuff, and a reflection of who's actually engaging with your content, and which is awesome as a business model because. It's so much more accurate than saying, on some black box in Huntly somewhere, 100 people watched Tangata Pasifika or whatever. Yeah.
What advice do you give to young people or entrepreneurs or people wanting to become storytellers and to tell their stories? And I guess you actually do this often on a day-to-day basis with all of the people who come up through your structures.
Yeah. Storytelling and creative currency is going to be exploding. I mean, it is exploding, but it's a way of the future, and it's bespoke storytelling and your point of difference. What is your point of difference in your story? I mean, those are things that you can't replicate by a robot or in any kind of factory kind of environment. And those are the things, those light bulb moments and those light bulb ideas. Are just leading the way at the moment, and nearly every sector. The creative innovation in every single sector, globally, is what's becoming recognised as being, so important, and it's translating that into a business model, I suppose, which is. It's maybe not the right term, but it's translating that into some realistic way of making it happen. So what we need in the sector are more producers, actually. That's where the bottleneck is. We've got a ton of amazing Pacific content creators and Pacific light bulb people. And there's, so many awesome ideas because there's a backlog because we've only just got the pathways. So, but we need more producers. We need more people to help make stuff happen and bring them into reality. I think that my advice just is believe in your light bulb moment. And also be more playful with ideas and things. I think we get taught kind of a rote in many ways about the ways you're supposed to think about ideas to bring to screen and formulas. And I think the best ideas have come from authentic moments in your life and joy and the wonder of it all, and just things that you genuinely think are completely crack up funny that you never imagined you'd be able to put on screen. Yeah, it's sort of like believing in the realness and authentic moments as being valid enough.
And having had success, academic success with the MA, and then success as a storyteller through Tangata Pasifika, and then as a producer with Fresh, and then as a content platform creator with the Coconut, how do you define success, and what does success look like for you?
I don't know. It's such a weird. I'm so scared of that word because it's really hard to put your. When I was growing up, I always got told in Samoa growing up that success was being a doctor or a lawyer. And those, because we always get told that those paradigms of Palangi success are the models, and work in a good office and blah blah blah. And I think, just for me personally, it's being able to do things in your daily, make a living from them that just give you joy. and then if you can do that, I mean, what a luxury, what a privilege to go to work and work with like-minded people, and just have joy. And I think it's as simple as that. And to be able to do the thing that you're good at. I mean, it's a privilege and it's wonderful.
It's so cool. Thank you so much, Lisa Tauma from Fresh TV and from the Coconut. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for pimping us out. Lovely to be here.
Thank you very much to Elizabeth Liddell for producing. And thank you very much for listening. If you have enjoyed today's chat, check out the back catalogue on the spin-off. We've got more than 100 of these chats with great New Zealand business people.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by The Spin-Off and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.